There is a kind of person that makes other people deeply and emotionally uncomfortable, and most of those people do not even understand why. You could be standing quietly, saying absolutely nothing, and someone across the room suddenly feels the need to confess something personal or walk away completely. You are not trying to do anything. You are simply existing, yet somehow that alone is enough to shift the whole feeling of a space. Psychologists have explored this behavior for many years. Anthropologists have discovered signs of it in ancient cultures across nearly every continent. In one of the oldest indigenous traditions in North America, they even gave this kind of person a special name, one that carries far more meaning than most people understand today. Today we are going to talk about that in a much deeper way. Not in the soft surface level style you may have heard before. We are going to explore real psychology, behavioral science, historical understanding, and parts of your own mind that you have probably experienced your entire life without ever finding the words to explain them. Stay with me carefully because by the end of this, you may understand something about yourself that changes the way you look at every interaction you have ever experienced. There is a concept in behavioral psychology known as involuntary influence. It describes the observed phenomenon where certain individuals change the emotional condition of others without meaning to, without effort, and sometimes without even speaking at all. These are not always charismatic leaders or trained therapists. They are often ordinary people carrying an unusual neurological pattern that quietly pushes everyone around them into a level of emotional honesty they never intended to reveal. In neuroscience, part of this can be explained through mirror neuron density. The average brain contains a basic level of mirror neurons. These are the cells connected to understanding emotions, predicting behavior, and creating empathy. But in certain individuals, this system works at a level that is far beyond normal. Their nervous system does not simply notice the room, it almost becomes the emotional atmosphere itself. Most people never realize that this is not always a pleasant gift. In reality, for many people who experience it, the first half of life feels less like a strength and more like a burden they cannot explain or escape. If you have ever felt like you were born on the wrong emotional frequency, like everyone else received a guidebook for how to exist in the world while yours somehow disappeared, then what you are hearing right now may finally explain your life in a way nothing else ever has. In the Lakota tradition, there is a respected archetype called the Heyoka. This is not simply a myth or symbol, but a recognized role within the community. A person often noticed from childhood as functioning differently from everyone else. Not damaged, not rebellious, simply wired in another way at such a deep level that even their understanding of reality seemed opposite from the people around them. The Lakota elders did not try to repair the Heyoka or push them aside. They did not medicate them or treat them as outsiders. Instead, they respected them because they understood something that modern psychology is only now beginning to measure. These individuals did not only experience the world more deeply, they influenced the world simply by existing inside it. But here is where many discussions about this subject become misleading. They present it as something beautiful and glowing. They package it in comforting language and tell you that you are rare, gifted, powerful, and chosen. Some of that may be true, but it ignores the most important part, the actual mechanism, the psychological and neurological reason why this happens, and more importantly, the personal cost attached to it and what can actually be done about it. So let us begin at the very start with something that likely happened to you so early in life that you may not even remember it clearly. Before you were old enough to describe it with language, you noticed things that other children around you did not seem to notice. You felt what people were truly feeling, not what they were pretending to feel, not what their face suggested, but the real emotion hidden underneath. The mother smiling while her hands trembled slightly. The teacher laughing louder and longer than necessary. The parent saying everything was fine with a voice carrying something that clearly was not fine at all. You could not explain it. You simply sensed it, as if there were always two conversations happening in every room at the same time. One conversation existed out loud, and another existed underneath the surface, where emotions were hidden. For some reason, you could hear both at once. This is known as emotional dissonance detection. It is a measurable cognitive ability, and in most people it works quietly in the background. They notice inconsistencies only when they become obvious or when they actively search for them. But in a small number of people, this function operates continuously, automatically, and with such sensitivity that being in a dishonest environment causes their entire nervous system to react strongly. You were not imagining things. You were not overreacting. Your brain was detecting micro-expressions, shifts in vocal tone, body language inconsistencies, and emotional signals that most people naturally ignore as unimportant background information. Your internal filter was simply designed differently from the very beginning. And this is where things become especially interesting. Because this heightened awareness system does not only allow you to notice what people feel, it also sends something back toward them. Researchers who study interpersonal emotional regulation refer to this as reflective resonance. It is one of the main reasons a person like you can feel so emotionally intense or confusing to others. When you're around someone, your nervous system starts reflecting their emotional condition with remarkable precision. But then something even stronger happens. It amplifies what they are already carrying and reflects it back to them. The person hiding anxiety suddenly feels twice as anxious. The person suppressing guilt suddenly feels it pressing heavily against their chest like physical pressure. They often do not know why this is happening. They cannot explain it logically or point toward anything specific that you said or did. They simply feel emotionally exposed in a way that goes beyond normal understanding. Some people will deeply appreciate you for this without fully understanding why. They may say you are easy to speak with. They may say you make them feel calm or emotionally safe. What they truly mean is that around you, they stop pretending. They no longer have enough emotional distance to continue performing because your presence quietly removes the space where performance usually survives. Other people will avoid you entirely. They may describe you as intense, exhausting, or emotionally overwhelming. What they really mean is that they arrived pretending to be someone else, and your presence made the act impossible. Neither of these reactions means you are doing anything wrong. It is simply the effect your nervous system has on the emotional atmosphere around you. But there is also a darker side to this that many feel-good discussions completely ignore because this sensitivity carries a serious and very real cost that deserves honest understanding. When your nervous system constantly absorbs, processes, amplifies, and reflects emotional information at this level, it creates a major physiological burden. Studies involving people with heightened empathic sensitivity consistently show elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep patterns, stronger baseline activation in the amygdala, and emotional exhaustion that often does not respond to normal forms of stress relief. You cannot always clear your mind with a short walk or distract yourself with entertainment the way other people can. The processing is happening below conscious awareness, which means it does not stop simply because you want it to stop. It only stops when your nervous system finally finishes processing everything it absorbed. And for someone like you, that process is rarely complete. This is why large parts of your life may have felt exhausting in ways that never matched your actual activity level. You wake up tired even after resting. You leave conversations feeling emotionally drained. You walk out of ordinary social situations feeling as though you have just finished something physically demanding. This is not weakness. It is the hidden cost of operating a nervous system that performs far more emotional labor than the average person while doing most of that work silently and invisibly beneath the surface. And there is another truth that almost nobody explains about this exhaustion. It creates a second effect that can become even more damaging over time. Because you spend so much energy absorbing and understanding the emotional experiences of others, your own emotional signals slowly become buried underneath all the noise. You become extremely skilled at understanding other people while slowly losing connection with yourself. You may understand exactly what a stranger is feeling after only a few minutes of conversation, yet struggle to understand your own desires or emotional needs. You may explain the deeper emotional patterns behind a friend's relationship problems with surprising clarity, while finding it incredibly difficult to identify your own needs inside an intimate relationship. This is not symbolic language. It is a documented feature of a hyper-empathic nervous system structure. The same emotional sensitivity that makes you extraordinary with other people can also make you feel disconnected from yourself. And the Lakota people understood this deeply. That is one reason why the Heyoka existed within a strong community structure rather than in isolation. They were not meant to carry their experience completely alone or be admired from a distance without support. They needed grounding, understanding, and emotional stability from the people around them in order to remain balanced. Their sensitivity required a safe container. Without that support, the very gift that allowed them to understand others could slowly turn into a personal wound that consumed them from within. Let me explain something that happens inside your mind while you are asleep. Most people with this kind of emotional sensitivity do not even realize this is happening, and it explains a lot about why you feel the way you do in the morning. When you fall asleep, your brain does not slow down the same way an average brain does. While most people slowly move into deeper and calmer rest, your brain during REM sleep becomes highly active, especially in areas connected to emotional processing, social understanding, memory organization, and problem solving. You are not resting in the normal sense of the word. Your mind is processing every unresolved emotional experience you face during the day and trying to organize it into something meaningful. Every conversation that carried hidden emotions, every moment where someone's words did not match the feeling underneath them, your sleeping brain takes all of that emotional information and studies it carefully. It compares it with old memories, past experiences, and emotional patterns you have collected throughout your life. Then, during the early morning hours, often between 3 and 5 a.m., your brain begins surfacing conclusions. This explains why you suddenly wake up understanding problems you never consciously solved. It explains why you sometimes sit upright with a strong feeling that you need to contact someone immediately. It also explains why confusion that felt overwhelming before sleep is sometimes replaced by strange clarity in the morning. The situation itself did not change. Your brain simply kept working while your body stayed still. This is not something mystical. It is neuroscience. It also helps explain why you often feel chronically exhausted in a way that extra sleep does not fully repair. You are not always resting during sleep. A large part of your brain is still working. Now let us talk about the social experience of living this way, because this is where things become especially uncomfortable, and it is important for you to understand that this is not your fault. When you are around a group of people, something begins happening automatically that you cannot really control. You become a kind of emotional center of gravity. This does not mean you are the loudest person in the room or the most entertaining or charismatic person there. It means the emotional atmosphere slowly starts organizing itself around your presence. Conversations that were shallow suddenly become deeper than expected. Someone who seemed emotionally stable suddenly begins crying without fully understanding why. The dynamic of the room changes. The pretending becomes weaker. And sometimes, not always, but often, the person hiding the biggest emotional performance in the room starts becoming visibly uncomfortable and either opens up honestly or leaves entirely. You have likely seen this happen many times without understanding the reason behind it. You probably believed you made things awkward or uncomfortable somehow, but you did not. Your presence simply creates emotional pressure on dishonesty, and dishonesty struggles to survive comfortably under that kind of pressure for very long. But there is something extremely important you need to understand about yourself and the way this sensitivity operates inside close relationships, because this is where the real complexity exists. In your deepest relationships, romantic partners, close friends, and family members, the mirror effect does not happen occasionally. It happens constantly. The people closest to you live inside an environment of continuous emotional reflection. They cannot avoid themselves for very long when they are around you. Even if that eventually helps them grow, it can still feel emotionally difficult to experience. The people who stay close to you over the years are usually individuals willing to face themselves honestly. They are committed to growth, self-awareness, and emotional truth. They may not always be easy people, but they are real people. The relationships you build with them usually carry a level of emotional depth that many people never experience in their lives. The people who leave, and there will always be people who leave, are usually leaving the mirror rather than leaving you personally. It is extremely important that you fully understand this difference, because believing that you are too intense, too emotional, or too difficult is one of the most damaging misunderstandings you can carry about yourself. You are not too much. You are simply too real for people who are not ready for honesty. But now I want to discuss something many people avoid because it complicates the clean and comforting story often attached to highly sensitive people. Having this sensitivity does not automatically make you wise, correct, or emotionally perfect. It does not guarantee that your perceptions are always accurate. One of the biggest dangers for someone with your level of sensitivity is assuming that every emotional impression automatically equals truth rather than interpretation. Your nervous system is extremely skilled at detecting emotional signals, but signals and meanings are not always identical. You may correctly sense that someone is angry while completely misunderstanding the reason behind their anger. You may feel that a relationship is ending and accurately notice emotional tension, but incorrectly identify what is actually causing it. This does not mean your sensitivity failed. It simply means powerful perception still requires careful interpretation. The healthiest version of a person like you combines deep sensitivity with deep humility. They feel strongly but interpret carefully. They trust emotional signals while still investigating the meaning behind them. The less mature version of this sensitivity, and nearly everyone with this profile experiences this stage at some point, treats emotional impressions as unquestionable truth and builds entire emotional realities around perceptions that were powerful but incomplete. This is also why stillness is not optional for you. It is necessary not only as a calming activity, but as something required for emotional clarity and mental stability. Without regular periods of silence, solitude, and emotional reset, you slowly lose the ability to separate your own feelings from the emotions you absorb from others. Eventually, you stop recognizing where your emotional world ends and someone else's begins. And when that boundary disappears, you do not only become overwhelmed, you begin losing connection with yourself completely. The ancient understanding surrounding the Heyoka always included periods of withdrawal and solitude. These moments were not treated as punishment or rejection from the community. They were seen as maintenance, a way to reset the emotional instrument before it became overloaded with distorted signals. Without this kind of intentional reset, the system begins operating on emotional confusion and corrupted input. If you are not creating this kind of stillness deliberately in your life, you are probably already feeling the effects even if you never had words for it before now. But let us also talk about the opposite side of this experience. What happens when this sensitivity becomes balanced, grounded, and emotionally healthy rather than overwhelmed and reactive? When the system is clear, when the person carrying this emotional depth is self-aware and emotionally grounded, something quietly extraordinary begins happening. You become the kind of presence people naturally seek during the most difficult moments of their lives, not because you always provide perfect answers, but because you offer something even more valuable. You make people feel truly seen without making them feel judged. You become someone capable of holding the full emotional reality of another person without becoming uncomfortable, dismissive, or emotionally frightened by it. You become the person people call late at night during moments of crisis. Not only because your advice can be meaningful, but because your presence alone makes emotional chaos feel manageable. Your nervous system communicates something calm and steady that quietly says, "I can sit with this. I can handle this with you." That is not a small thing in a world filled with people who become uncomfortable around emotional pain and immediately try to minimize it, silence it, or push it away. Your ability to remain emotionally present with another person's suffering without trying to escape it is one of the rarest things a human being can offer someone else. And strangely, you do this best when you stop trying so hard. Not when you perform empathy or search desperately for the perfect comforting words. Your gift becomes strongest when you are simply honest, real, calm, and fully present as yourself without pretending. That is when your sensitivity becomes healing rather than overwhelming noise. The Heyoka was not believed to heal through effort alone. The healing came through presence, through refusing to pretend, through moving through the world in a way that quietly forced people to see themselves more honestly. That is the deeper nature of what you are, a disruption that creates clarity, a mirror that reflects truth rather than comfort, a presence that transforms people not through agreement, but through emotional honesty. But now we need to discuss something even more important, what you owe yourself. Because most conversations about people like you focus only on what you give to others, what you carry for them, and what you provide emotionally. Almost nobody talks about what you need in order for this sensitivity to remain healthy instead of slowly becoming emotionally destructive. You need to stop exhausting yourself trying to explain your nature to people who have no interest or ability to understand it. This is one of the biggest drains on your energy, and you probably do it more often than you realize. Someone calls you intense, confusing, or too emotionally direct, and you spend huge amounts of emotional effort trying to make your personality easier for them to accept. You need to stop doing that. You cannot weaken your emotional signal just to make other people's nervous systems more comfortable. What you can do is choose environments where your presence is welcomed rather than resisted. You also need clear and firm boundaries around how much of your emotional world you share with people who have not earned your trust. Your emotional depth is not something that should be freely available to everyone around you. It is personal and valuable, and you have probably shared too much of it with people who never truly respected it. You also need at least one or two people in your life who genuinely see you clearly. Not people who idolize you, depend on you, or simply use your emotional understanding for their own comfort. You need people who can see your confusion, exhaustion, mistakes, strengths, and emotional complexity and still remain beside you honestly. If you do not currently have that kind of connection, creating it should become a serious priority in your life. You also need to accept that you may never fully belong in many social environments, not because there is something wrong with you, but because your emotional frequency is different from what many environments are built to handle. That is not a tragedy. It is useful information. It tells you where to stop wasting emotional energy and where to begin investing it instead. And when you finally find the right people, places, and work that genuinely connect with your nature, something powerful happens. That lifelong feeling of being an outsider starts becoming lighter. The feeling of standing at the edge of every room while everyone else seems connected slowly begins fading. The loneliness softens enough to remind you that the problem was never your existence. The problem was simply the environments you kept trying to survive inside. So, if there is one thing to remember from all of this, let it be this. The way you experience the world is not something you need to hide, apologize for, or shrink in order to make other people comfortable. Your sensitivity is not weakness. Your depth is not a flaw. The reason you notice things others ignore, feel emotions so strongly, and naturally bring honesty into the spaces around you is because your mind and nervous system are built differently. And while that difference can feel exhausting at times, it can also become one of the most meaningful parts of your life when you learn how to care for it correctly. You were never meant to carry everyone else's emotions while abandoning your own needs. You were never meant to spend your life trying to fit into spaces that require you to become smaller, quieter, or less real. The most important step is not changing who you are. It is understanding who you are with clarity, balance, and self-respect. The more grounded you become within yourself, the more your presence becomes calming instead of draining, clear instead of confusing, and meaningful instead of overwhelming. Not everyone will understand you, and not everyone is supposed to. Some people will feel comfort around your honesty, while others may avoid it because it asks them to face parts of themselves they are not ready to see. That is not your responsibility to carry. Your responsibility is to protect your peace, choose the right environments, build healthy boundaries, and stay connected to your own inner voice instead of losing yourself in everyone else's emotions. Because when you stop fighting your nature and start working with it, something changes. You stop feeling like a stranger in your own life. You stop seeing your sensitivity as a burden and begin recognizing it as a quiet strength that allows you to connect, understand, and help others in a way that is rare and deeply human. And maybe that is what this entire journey has been trying to teach you all along, not how to become someone else, but how to finally become fully yourself.